Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Loop1 live broadcast. My name is Helen Owens-Pope, and I'm responsible for global marketing here at Loop1, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. So I'm delighted to be joined by Loop1 CEO, Bill Fitzpatrick, together with John O'Callaghan, Director of International Product Marketing, and Nigel Douglas, Sales Engineer from SolarWinds team here in EMEA. We'll be kicking the session off with Bill, who will set the scene for today's webinar and introduce Loop1. And then following on from Bill, John will provide an overview of SolarWinds Application Performance Solutions. And for today's session, the focus will be on Server and Application Monitor and AppOptics. He'll also provide a brief update on the latest Orion release before handing over to Nigel, who will dive a little deeper into some of the key features with a live demo. So before we get started, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. So all attendees will be muted throughout the course of today's webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can drop me a chat message via the chat panel in your event window. You can submit questions via the Q&A panel at any point during the presentation today, and I'll put them to the panelists later in the session. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the link with all attendees, typically within about 48 hours of the live broadcast. And lastly, please let us know how we did today by completing the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. So with that, I will hand you over to Bill. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Helen, and thank you. And thanks to John and to Nigel for joining us.
No problem at all.
Thanks
nice,
to...
nice city behind you there, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning from Austin, Texas. It's still a little early for us here, but it's a nice hot day in Texas as we usually get. So we'll jump into it here. Just a little bit of a brief history about myself here in Loop1. If you're not familiar with us, Loop1 has been around since 2009. I joined it after spending a little bit of time as the sales engineer for Latin America at SolarWinds, and took sole ownership of the company back in 2017. But I was always on the engineering side of the house, so I love doing webinars like these. I love talking about the products and geeking out on the tools. And I oftentimes will say, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be the engineer, but I've ended up as the CEO. 2019 was a really big year for Loop1 because through my ownership, we've really expanded our international focus, and we've added team members in London and grown that European operation to about 15 employees. And then, of course, towards the end of the year last year, expanded into Asia Pacific through the acquisition of a group called Xlate, bringing us to just about 100 employees worldwide. So as you can see, we've got offices, our headquarters in Austin, Texas, as well as offices in Cork, London, Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Melbourne. And we've also added this past year our Cisco Select Partner status. So we're Premier Partner for Cisco in Australia, and we are Select Partner in both North America and in Europe. What we do at Loop1 is we really focus on helping clients get the most out of their SolarWinds investment. And we do that using something that we call ITOM Plus. And as you can see here, ITOM Plus is really the combination of the best of breed tools, like we're going to be talking about today, the people working together, talented people like John, who if you get a chance to see him, he's not only a talented marketer, but he also plays a mean guitar and sings quite well. And it was great, John. Everybody enjoyed it. So it's about our teams working together. It's about Loop1 and our expertise around the tools and IT monitoring and ITSM, as well as SolarWinds. And not just SolarWinds from a product perspective, but also SolarWinds from a support perspective, from a sales perspective, just the collaboration across the SolarWinds organization with Loop1 and, of course, with your organization as well. And our goal is to work with all parts of your organization. We want to be working with practitioners. We want to be working with directors. We want to be working with your executive leadership, because we have a model that says that with the best tools in place, we're going to get the best business outcomes. And so to dive in a little bit more to our ITOM maturity approach, we do offer an assessment for our clients to be able to have a roadmap and a scorecard to really understand how well their tools are working throughout their organization. So it's a very simple, lightweight exercise that starts with just getting to know you and your organizational structure. I tell people all the time, we all run the same solutions. We all run Cisco, we all run Microsoft, we all run VMware, we all have cloud, but we all use it in a little bit different way. And so what we want to do is understand your organization and how you use your tools. And then, of course, we want to understand what tools you're using, because to really be mature and to really have full stack visibility, you've got to have the right tools working together in the right way. And so through that assessment, we end up with what we call a LIME score, which is the maturity of the tool's deployments. And we find quite regularly that there are silos within our client organizations where there's great maturity perhaps in some aspects of monitoring and ITSM, and then there are areas where there's opportunities to improve. And most often what we find is there's opportunities to improve correlation, and there's opportunities to improve insights from data. And so that brings us to really both what we assess as well as the scores that we use. So we're really looking to help understand adoption and enablement. Have the tools really been deployed completely and correctly, and are they being embraced and used by all of the different stakeholders in the organization that can benefit from the tools? Have the tools been deployed in a feature-complete fashion? Are all of the features that the tool is able to provide being used correctly? And this isn't to say that you must use every feature, but you should know what all the features are. Clients tell us time and time again, I didn't know SolarWinds could do that. Sometimes it's because there are upgrades available that haven't been deployed, and other times it's because their focus for the purchase of a tool was different than some of the other capabilities that the tool might include. So our goal is to really make sure that there's awareness and adoption for the features that are valuable for your organization. And of course, this wouldn't be complete if we weren't doing everything that we do in a secure and compliant way. So we're really emphasizing not just the deployment of the tools for security and compliance, but leveraging the tools to take advantage of all of the things that they can do to drive security and drive compliance. And a big part of what Loop1 brings to the table is our ability to really maximize the tool's capabilities, and in SolarWinds in particular, with automation and integration. So that's using the Orion SDK, that's integrating to third-party tools like a ticketing system, and that's automating that correlated view of data across the platform. We're definitely considering ourselves with availability and performance, but not just availability and performance of the tool, but the focus of what the tool is collecting. When we talk about data analytics and business outcomes, it's fundamentally important that the tools are deployed to collect the information you need to do good data analytics and drive business outcomes. We're moving beyond, we're maturing beyond the idea that tools are just there to keep things running. Keeping things running is a given, and slow is the new down, and we have to go beyond just, is it online? But rather we have to focus on how well is it working? And what can I use the data from my IT tools to drive business decisions? How can I use that data to drive business decisions? And so that's really what we talk about when we go from typical to optimized to insightful. It's moving away from a realm where there's just too much alert noise, there's a lack of correlation, there's silos and separation, and we're moving to an optimized state where we've got integrated and correlated data with shared visibility, automated incident management, and really successful audit and compliance for security and remediation of compliance issues. And then, of course, driving into being insightful with our tools, going well beyond monitoring, knowing that we have data we can trust, and using that data to do forecasting, budgeting, capacity planning, and all of the things that can be really challenging to get to that level of maturity and stay there through the evolution and the implementation of our tools. So that's just a little bit about us here at Loop1 and what we do in terms of leveraging our maturity model to help drive tool adoption and really make sure that the tools are delivering on all of the things that we want them to do, right? So that's reducing risk, it's insightful analytics, it's complete integration, it's absolutely unquestionable performance and monitoring data, it's true remediation for compliance and audit, it's taking the silos that are there in your organization and making them work well, not only as a silo, but between each other, right? And having strong silos that complement each other. So expertise in networking and expertise in virtualization and expertise in database all come together in a way that delivers better business outcomes through that improved consistency of maturity across the teams, as well as the greater insight that comes from having that data you can trust. And where possible, we're going to also try to reduce costs through tool consolidation. And this is a quick glance of the grid itself. This is the detailed level of what we talk about on a per technology and sort of per rating basis in Lime. And of course, we're happy to explore that in more depth with you. But for now, what we want to do is go ahead and turn the conversation over to the tools themselves, and we want to talk about application performance management today. So we're going to talk about two tools that really help deliver on application performance beyond what you might think they're capable of or what you may have seen already. So we're going to be talking about Server and Application Monitor, which is a native tool to the Orion suite and has been for years, and really extends the visibility for our servers down into the application layer. So we're able to see services and all types of components of service delivery for an application. And then, of course, we're going to talk about AppOptics, which extends on the SAM capabilities into a cloud-based approach that is equally powerful and delivers on some things that SAM can't do. And so we'll let John and Nigel speak to that.
Perfect. Thanks very much indeed, Bill, and thanks very much for the invitation to join you today, and to Helen for organizing everything in the back there. So first of all, for those of you who are on the call who are familiar with SolarWinds, hopefully you're familiar with the IT Operations Management Framework, which I'll go through in a second. For those of you who are not familiar with SolarWinds, maybe, I joined SolarWinds about 2.5 years ago, and even the change in those 2.5 years has been quite considerable in the number of acquisitions we've done, the expansion of the products and offerings that we bring to the marketplace. And of course, we hold up Loop1 as kind of a shining example of really a platinum level partner that's delivering all of these professional services to our clients around the world. Because we don't do that, right? What we do is we build products, and we use our global partner network to help bring those services to their clients, which is obviously really, really important to provide that local relationship and the local capabilities. And Bill has invested heavily in SolarWinds training with SolarWinds certified professionals in the team all around the world now. So thanks for all that, Bill. We do appreciate all the support you give us as an organization. Just moving, before we get into the Nigel Douglas special session, because Nigel, as many people know, is the grandnephew of Michael Douglas. We'll get to that in a second. So the IT Operations Management Portfolio, or the framework, as we call it. So this is something we've brought to kind of our messaging over the last 6 months or so. And really, we wanted to kind of bring everything together into a simple story for organizations to kind of be able to digest, what does SolarWinds do, what do we offer to the marketplace. And as you can see, there are kind of 6 main pillars within this framework. Across the top there, you have service management, and deliberately not called IT service management, because we see service management as managing requests from anywhere in the business, right? So you could have HR requests coming in, you could have purchasing and procurement looking for requests, you could have legal requests, you can have, of course, the IT side of it, and so on. So it's really being able to streamline service management across the entire organization. And the ability then to integrate that, and as Bill mentioned earlier on, the integration, interoperability of these technologies into traditional kind of IT stack management tools and monitoring tools is really, really crucial. The 4 orange layers you see there, so we will focus on application performance management, or APM, and of course that's an industry standard kind of marketplace that is measured by the likes of Gartner and these organizations around the world. And we can talk a little bit about how we've expanded in that space. Applications have changed quite considerably. I've been in IT now for 32 years. I started off in 1988 over in the UK with a company called ICL. Some of you may know that. Back in the mainframe days, went through the mini systems, went through Windows and client server virtualization, and all the years we've seen in IT. And of course, applications, in the old days, you had your packaged applications, you had your in-house developed applications using software cycles of 18 months, 2 years, sometimes if it doesn't work, maybe 3 or 4 years, right? That's the way things used to be done, and people would deploy those applications traditionally in-house in their data centers or in co-locations, etc. Of course, the last 10 years, that's changed dramatically. We've seen the adoption of SaaS applications being very heavily adopted, particularly in the mid-market and SMB, where organizations are saying, I don't want to have to worry about the infrastructure or the application itself. I just want to consume the service and pay a subscription for that on a per-user basis or whatever the case might be in terms of how they price it. And then more recently, we've seen the advent of the kind of DevOps teams and the agile development and this whole kind of mobile application custom app development as well. So for us to be able to go to the marketplace, with Loop1 and say, hey, we can cover all of those application environments. We need to look at the products we have that cover the traditional type ones and the SaaS ones and all these other ones. So the good news is today, with Server Application Monitor and AppOptics and Pingdom and Loggly and other products within that portfolio, we can really essentially cover all of the applications that organizations are using. And as they do their digital transformation, moving more and more towards custom apps and more towards SaaS, we'll work along that path as well with them. Underlying that, of course, you have your database performance management, and we might touch on this as well a little bit because they're intrinsically linked to a large extent, applications and databases. And once again, that market has changed considerably. So you have your traditional SQL relational databases, Oracle SE, and then Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition. You had your Microsoft SQL Server, your DB2, your SAP ASC, your Sybase, and so on. So we kind of covered all of those with Database Performance Analyzer. But of course, a lot of organizations now with their custom apps and their DevOps environments, they're looking at things like MongoDB, NoSQL environments, open source databases. So we acquired technology last year to help us monitor and manage those as well with Database Performance Monitor. Right? So we're, again, covering the vast majority of the databases that people are going to use out there. Both application and database, of course, are going to rely on infrastructure. So the underlying physical server, virtual hosts, virtual machines, be they on-premise, be they up in Azure, infrastructure as a service, we need to be able to monitor all of those. The associated storage arrays have to be monitored and managed because any kink in the armor, basically, any weak link in that chain can cause an application to degrade or fail, and that's a big impact on an organization. And then finally, of course, where SolarWinds is mostly known for is in the network management side of things. So when I'm at trade shows, and Bill, I'm sure you see the same thing, people come up to you and say, you're the network monitoring company. Well, we yes, but we do a hell of a lot of other stuff as well. So let me take you through this framework. And this is why we created it, so we can build a story to help organizations really understand the full capability. On the right-hand side, then you have IT security. So that's kind of in a vertical sense because it permeates across all of those horizontal layers. Right? You've got application security concerns, you have database security concerns, infrastructure security, network security, and so on. So those 6 pillars make up the framework of IT operations management, or hybrid IT operations management, which is probably an even better description of it. Our customer base, as Bill outlined as well, traditionally was the IT professional, right, the administrator level. When we talk around integration to single pane of glass, visibility, and so on, that moves up to maybe IT management, IT director, VP of infrastructure, or whatever. And then when we look at ITOM, or IT operations management, as a strategic initiative, then we're talking at the CX level. So this is where Bill talked around being able to work with all the various teams within an organization. And on the bottom layer, of course, you have, we monitor on-premise, we monitor cloud. We can also deploy on-premise and in cloud as well, which is more and more kind of becoming common within the marketplace. So that's kind of an important image because it brings you through, in a simple sense, the story of SolarWinds so far. Getting into a little bit of more nitty-gritty in terms of the Orion Platform 2020.2. Before we get into that, we have changed the kind of naming convention on the releases. So we used to have like Network Performance Monitor 12.1, .2, .3, .4. We had Network Configuration Manager, was it 8.7 or 8.8 or something, and every product had different naming conventions, or version levels. So we decided to standardize that last year with our 2019.4 release, and of course it relates to the year and the quarter. Or quarter, because I know quarters vary by company, but we run from January to December. So if you see a .2, that means it's somewhere between April and June, basically. If you see .4, that's going to be October to November time. Why do we do that? Well, we can kind of standardize all the releases to the same name, and then customers can understand much more quickly when you do an assessment build of the environment. You can advise the customer exactly what age the products are and what upgrades are available to them, and then you can provide those upgrade supports as you go through your assessments and so on. But one of the big things that's been changing ever since I joined SolarWinds is scalability. When I joined 2.5 years ago, we could monitor up to 100,000 network elements. So in just, get my maths right here, 32 months or 33 months, it's gone up to 1 million elements in a single environment. So really true enterprise level stuff from a scalability perspective. On the application side, and Nigel's going to cover the SAM demo in a few minutes, we have now up to 550,000 components per installation, which again is a huge increase. Both of those, of course, will require multiple polling engines, but that is the level it can get to in a single environment. We've enhanced the visualizations, been focusing a lot on kind of intelligent mapping, dynamic mapping, being able to allow customers to create their own customized environments, and we've introduced time travel as well. We had time travel on some features like NetPath, for example, so you could go back and see what a software-defined network looked like, 10 hours ago or yesterday, or whatever the case might be, when something happened. So we've now introduced that into our dynamic maps as well, so you can go back in time and see exactly what that infrastructure looked like at a particular incident. Dashboarding, we've introduced modern dashboards. The middle section of the screenshot there, you can see that, very, very suitable for NOC environments. And I'm sure Bill will develop lots of good professional services around customizing these things and the maps and so on as you go forward. And that's very important from a visual perspective, that people can see very, very quickly if there is a problem occurring within their environment in any part of the stack. One thing as well which is challenging for customers is upgrades. When I looked after accounts myself in previous roles, every Tuesday or Wednesday there was an approvals board for the upgrades, and about 50 people got into a room and they had to all fight which upgrade is going to get done. We understand that kind of challenge, so we want to kind of help organizations through things like pre-staging. So you can download all the bits, get things ready, and when you're ready to go, you can do your upgrades. We also want to help with upgrade plans. And of course, Bill has that fantastic maturity model to help you kind of get to the stage you need to get to using these upgrade capabilities. And we want people to upgrade as much as possible to the latest versions, because we want to take advantage of the latest features, the performance, and all the great things that come with the new releases. A couple of other smaller improvements there as well. Enhanced volume status, where you can now see the warning and critical statuses based on usage thresholds. And we've also added some third-party language pack support for the Orion console as well. Okay, so moving into the application side of things, so application performance. So many of you hopefully are familiar with Server Application Monitor. Hopefully you're already using it. If not, this is a solution that can help you monitor, would be more focused traditionally at the packaged applications and SaaS applications, but it can do on-premise and cloud as well, which is great. It comes with 1,200 templates. So the way we monitor an application in this sense is we build a template around that particular application, and that template is built up of the kind of associated executables and the associated processes and services that keep that application running. A good simple example would be if you do Control-Alt-Escape on your laptop, you'll see your processes, your and services that are running in the laptop, for example. So it's basically making a template out of all the things that make the application run, and then monitoring each and every one of those components. So if one of those components fails, you get alerted that it could potentially impact the performance of the application itself. We also have a thing called App Insight. So App Insight, whenever you see the word insight in one of our products, it's basically saying that it's got a much richer and deeper experience for those particular technologies. And as you can see in this case, we focus heavily on the Microsoft world of Exchange, Active Directory, IaaS Web Services, and SQL Server for the application side of it. And of course, it's an Orion Platform product, so that will integrate with all the other Orion products to provide you with that integrated visibility, as I call it, for your IT operations. Into the next one, we have some of the new things we've done on SAM. So we've simplified API polling, and again, Nigel will bring you through that in a few minutes. The scalability we mentioned, 550,000 components per instance, and up to 40,000 components now per polling engine as well. vMan is kind of included here a little bit because it's kind of underlying infrastructure to manage applications and to make sure applications are running smoothly. So I just wanted to kind of mention a couple of key things here, that we've added Nutanix monitoring within the vMan product, or virtualization manager. So now if anybody's running VMware or Microsoft Hyper-V or Nutanix, we've got a single solution that can help them not just monitor it, but actually manage the entire environment through things like sprawl management, planning, capacity planning, etc. We've also added in some nice kind of smaller features in there as well, like FIPS compliance for VMware, added more granularity in storage metrics, and also supporting some non-English Hyper-V hosts as well. And then moving into kind of the new kind of SaaS fancy stuff for the DevOps custom apps type environments, we have AppOptics. So this is an acquisition that we made because, as I said earlier, we realized that applications are changing and we need to be able to monitor all of them, right? So AppOptics provides us with that capability as a SaaS offering into the marketplace to allow people to monitor those custom apps and integration into our product called Logly, which also can collect logs directly from applications, and you can identify a log instance, I should say, if something happens, and dig into that to understand what may have happened. Lots of integrations and plugins. Again, Nigel will bring you through all the technical details on this one. And we might also touch on the database side, such as MongoDB and Redis, these NoSQL databases, which are typically aligned with these newer custom type apps that are being built out there. And around all of that, of course, we have the ITOM framework, but very, very importantly as well, we have the SolarWinds Customer Success Program, which to me is really, really important because, if I'm out buying something on Amazon, yes, I'm buying it for the product, the features, the functionality, will it do what I want it to do, but I'm also going to be looking at the kind of service I get from that customer, or from that supplier, I should say. So if I get fast delivery and they communicate on a regular basis and they help me through any issues and returns and refunds or whatever the case might be, then that's a positive experience, right? If they don't, then it's a very negative experience and the chances of buying again is going to be limited. So we want to kind of make sure that all of our customers are aware of all the things you get as a customer outside of the product and the solution. So you get your very own customer portal, so you can log in there, you'll see all your licenses, you'll see all the upgrades available. You can access the Success Center, which is over 20,000 technical documents and videos. You have access to SolarWinds Smart Start, which is kind of probably the only little bit of services we offer in terms of helping people get onboarding. But Loop1 have their own services around that, so you can do that. And then the Academy, of course, in terms of training, you get free training with SolarWinds if you're on maintenance or if you have a valid subscription. And of course, you can have your technical folk go through the certified professional course as well, if you wish. One important area as well is the online community. So this is where there's over 150,000 end users, partners, head geeks from SolarWinds. Yes, it is a job title. Product managers, product marketing, a whole bunch of people active on the TWAC community. Got his name, by the way, from Batman, I believe, in the old comics. So this is a place where you can ask questions, get answers. You can even put in feature requests. A lot of the features we bring to the marketplace are based on requests we get through the TWAC community. And then we also have, of course, our global SolarWinds support. Professional support is the one you get when you have the license, when you pay for the license. And the enhanced Premier support and enterprise support are more the service level guidelines included. You get access to certain teams and so on and so forth. So you can get more enhanced experience on the support side of things. And for our partners, of course, and Loop1 are constantly joining us in the partner portal, accessing content from there, getting information from SolarWinds to help them locally provide the solutions to the marketplace.
If I could just quickly touch on a couple of things there, John, that you mentioned, I wanted to just really highlight for clients on that previous slide, the journey that Loop1 and SolarWinds are partnering with you to deliver. It starts with Smart Start, right? Depending on your organization and the size of your deployment, Smart Start is a terrific way to make sure that your tools are implemented correctly. It's enhanced greatly by taking advantage of the Premier Support offering, which includes the guidelines, the enhanced service level guidelines that John mentioned, but also includes annual health check. And then, of course, at the enterprise tier, there's a deeper relationship for a more in-depth health check that's available as an enterprise client. And then what Loop1 does, it aligns to those resources and expands upon them and becomes an extension of those things. So the custom consulting, custom scripting, custom development, global architecture, and really taking everything to the next level. So you're looking at your tool acquisition and your tool deployment. Don't overlook Smart Start and don't overlook the Premier and Enterprise support because they're key components to really making sure that you get the most out of your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder, we have actually created a new IT operations management brochure. So this will be available, Bill, just for your interest. It'll be on the partner portal tonight, I believe. So you can download these and deliver them out to your customer base. And really, this view here is, you got to imagine this is a brochure, so it kind of folds, right? So the actual first page is the framework page, the Simplify IT Operations Management. So you get a simple view of the framework, the pillars. When you open that up, you'll have the second page, which is the pillars itself and some bullet points outlining what they do. And then, of course, you have your product matrix, which fit into each of those pillars. To simplify it down, we used to have a column for the kind of licensed products and the SaaS products. We've made it a bit easier just to put a little grey tab on the products which are SaaS-based now. And then on the back, as Bill earlier said earlier on, there's kind of three ways you can engage with Loop1 and SolarWinds, right? You have fixed a problem, you've got an urgent issue that needs resolving. We can identify through quick assessment or Q&A, which product from this portfolio can help you best to fix that problem right now. So you may have a network challenge or an application performance challenge or a database performance challenge or whatever, and we can help you fix that. The next step up then would be kind of integrating multiple products together to create a single pane of glass platform solutions, more that integrated visibility that I talk about. And then the third level up is when you really look at IT operations management as a strategic initiative. You want to look at it as a holistic view because you have maybe 20 projects on the go or 30 projects on the go. And typically the question around how do I monitor all these things comes at the end. We want to bring that to the forefront, right? We want you to have put in place a framework and a platform that will allow you to monitor and manage all of those projects, right? Rather than having different fragmented solutions that don't talk to each other. So that's a nice little handy guide to help you do that. And we've also introduced subscription pricing. So this is for the traditional products which were perpetually licensed with maintenance. Why is that important? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that if people purchase perpetual licenses with maintenance, typically that's a CapEx, right? So you have to go to get approvals on CapEx. All the accountants gather around the table and figure out how they're going to depreciate that over a number of years. And it's typically a more difficult route to get budget for spending. If you go subscription, you can convert that into an OpEx, right? So you can. It's much easier typically to access an operational expenditure budget within an IT department. So that's one very helpful thing around that. It's a lower entry point, so we're not positioning this as cheaper because over time it balances out, right? But it is certainly a lower entry point. As you can see the example on the right there, SolarWinds Network Performance Monitor SL100, which is the smallest license for that particular product. On the perpetual side, kicks off at about €2,440 at list price, and then you would pay a percentage of that each year thereafter to maintain the support and the product updates and the training, etc. The subscription price kicks off at $1,290, so it's a lower entry point if people want to look at kind of an extended project. And if you are looking at kind of enhancing or monitoring your IT operations management, monitoring and management, and you want to do that on a pilot phase and you want to have enough time to be able to run the project to gather enough information and analysis and get used to the product, then subscription would be a very good option. We do it on an annual basis. It's not a monthly one. And it's not a SaaS offering, so this is not like NPM on SaaS. This is just a commercial option to help you, do these projects more easily. Okay, so our mantras: we want to be easy to use, right? We want to be able to scale with you. We want to make it affordable and provide you the solutions that you need at any given time. As I said, we have that modular approach, so you can take it. We want to fix a problem, or we can connect those modules together to provide you with a platform. And then strategically looking at visibility into IT from a full stack perspective using the comprehensive ITOM portfolio that we have. So that's the kind of the ITOM story. What I'm going to do is quickly hand over now to Nigel. We're going to dig a little bit more deeper now into the demonstration in relation to the SAM and AppOptics. So Nigel, over to you.
Perfect. So for the SolarWinds Orion platform, it is modular approach. So you use what you need. Today we're focusing on the applications module, so Server Application Monitor. If you're looking to monitor your internal network from like networking devices perspective, switches, routers, firewalls, we have modules for that. If it's for configuration side on your virtualized environments, then we have modules for that as well, whether it be storage, web performance, there's a bunch of them. But for today's purpose, we're looking at Server Application Monitor. Now, as John went on there a while ago, there are I wouldn't even say dozens, there are hundreds of different templates that you can work with and build your own templates. But then we have what we call App Insight. So there are some key application performance template monitors, and these are for Active Directory, Office 365, Microsoft Exchange, and Microsoft SQL Server, as well as IIS. The idea behind that is a lot of businesses rely on these kind of key high-level, tools that are on everyone reports or kind of use them in one way or another. So being able to see, in the case of Active Directory, things like trust summary, knowing how different entities tie into one another is key. How we address this in SolarWinds, especially through Server Application Monitor, is on your network, once you've installed this Orion platform on a centralized, say, Windows server, your goal then is to perform a network discovery, specify a list of IP addresses, subnet, whatever it is that you're trying to discover, perform a NetBIOS discovery, and use remote protocols like WMI, SNMP, ICMP ping to pull back that data from those remote hosts. So in this example, you can see there's an Active Directory view of a bunch of servers, the different underlying drives, that kind of stuff. But also we see how they all talk to one another. You can see the latency and packet loss, if there is any, between those points of communication. With the traffic light system, it's pretty straightforward as to whether they are in a good state if they're green, warning in the case of yellow, or critical in red. So what App Insight does is it gives us this deep level analysis into different things like, well, every view is going to show us the top 10 components. These are the key performance indicators of that specific application, such as, what is the statistical data? Are they down? What is response time? Is there high CPU? That kind of stuff. But in a specific host, if I was to go into the host view, and you can see here I have App Insight for Active Directory, and it's running on a specified host. If I was to go down a level, I can see those key performance indicators, but on the host itself, I can actually see what is going on. So I can see if the application is, let's say, down, is it because the host is down? Or if the host is in a critical state, is it due to any specific application? So what Server Application Monitor does is it really gives us this, well, first of all, a high-level holistic view of our organization. So we have App Stack view that shows us this single host could be assigned to multiple groups, and those groups might have, in this case, Windows Server group, of which there's different states inside them. There's going to be systems that have problematic states, but also on this server, it might have 2 different applications or more. And being able to see Active Directory is running on this server, but this server itself is associated with a virtual data center. It is a virtualized host, and that's clear from the Node Details overview. With Server Application Monitor, ultimately, what we're trying to do is pull back as much data as we can from, as John says, traditionally proprietary softwares of other vendors. So it's not stuff we're building ourselves. We want to just get the data as soon as possible. So being able to remotely discover, like in this case, a system via WMI on a polling interval of 120 seconds, that's great. It's telling me, this system's running, here's the health, everything's looking good. But now I have a bunch of other applications that are also sitting on that system. Being able to go into the SAM summary and see all of the different applications we're using a template for. So this is the real way of simplifying processes, that our engineers or our community as well build these component templates so that you can just choose a template, assign a template for your host, and pull back those key performance indicators on it. So if it's in the case of an Oracle database, let's say, that resides on a Windows server, being able to see Oracle is in a critical state, this is happening on 2 different servers, and for that I can see the server itself is in a warning state, but Oracle is in a critical state. And I can even, by hovering over it, you get a tooltip that shows you the components with that specific problem, as well as some health metrics such as memory usage or CPU usage. But then being able to actually see all of the components that are actually pulled back via that component template, and actually seeing, okay, the issues with free space in the table space, it's an allocation issue. That's what we want to focus on. And being able to actually go into the host and not just get performance metrics and say, okay, this is your issue, but then being able to automate workflows. From a management view here, I can remotely go in and perform, service control management. I can stop and start services. I can remotely reboot or perform SSH on the device. But being able to then set up alerting to automate flows to say, if that specific server is to go down, or if it's to have specific key performance metrics that are going above a certain, like CPU is a very common example. CPU goes above a certain percentage for a certain amount of time. I want to kick in an automation action, say when that happens, we can send a HTTPS notification to our endpoint, which is to set up to maybe a CI/CD tool like Jenkins. And we can do that via the alerts. And this, again, the real power behind Orion is taking in data from different sources and being able to automate these flows. So whether it's overlapping data from networking or from the database or from the applications, there's already a bunch of alerts here. But even if I was to build one, I could do this in a couple of seconds with great granularity. I could add a new alert. I could say, in this case, I'm going to call it CPU test, just because that's what I'm going to alert on. And you can see I've got a bunch of different filters. I can set it down to severity of the alert and how often this should be triggered condition and the responsible team that manage it. But in the conditions itself, I can be really granular with and/or Boolean logic to say if maybe CPU goes above a certain point and/or something else has to happen. But in this case, I'm just looking for any node where, say, CPU load is equal to 80% for maybe 5 minutes. And I can set that 5 minutes or seconds or hours. But then we're going to go to the actions. We're going to ignore the reset condition. We're going to say it automatically resets itself. And we don't mind what time of the day. I'm going to be the same admin who's going to handle all the requests. But I can also, and this shows as well SolarWinds ITOM perspective and how we tie into other modules and really give a consolidated view into what's going on in your organization. I can add an action. I could, let's say, create an incident on a service desk, whether it be ServiceNow, which is a very popular external service desk, or on SolarWinds Service Desk, we could do that. We could remotely, if using virtualization management, we could use, the managed VM options. But even on an application performance issue here, I could send a webhook to that endpoint, whether it be Slack for an alert amongst my team, or I want to, set up an action to perform some automation task. Sending the message, the HTTPS post notification to Jenkins to perform that CI/CD action. Or maybe I want to restart the system. So Server Application Monitor allows us to get, yes, health performance metrics, but also allows us to automate flows and being able to, even if I'm out of the office for the weekend, that it handles in severe scenarios the ability to shut down a system or stop a process. When we look into these deep template dives, we can see things like a topology view. And again, you can build these out yourself. Once you start pulling data into Orion, it does this dependency mapping for you. So if I have a system that has applications associated with it, all I'm worried about is dropping the entity, being the system, into the viewer, and then looking at those child entities. And the ability to build out these really powerful maps, and when any changes occur, such as a metric going above a certain threshold, and it being able to change the color to reflect that change in performance, is super. And then if I see this system that's in a critical state, I can hover over it to see what is the overview data on it, like number of VMs running on this data center. But also if it's a specific host that's in a warning state and I just need to know more about it, I can then click into it. It'll redirect me to a new view specific to that Hyper-V host where it's got all the supporting data on it. So finding, a needle in a haystack when it comes to a complex or distributed network is really good. And this is, as you see, is how you get it. We've got this app stack view, again, as I say, topology mapping, to see where a server ties in regards to different groups and what applications are running. Most of them are fine, but knowing that on that system, there might be an application in a warning critical state, and being able to go into that critical application, in this case, Exchange that had this replication issue, or maybe it was to do with copy queue length, but being able to go deep dive further and actually find out, not just application performance metrics, but system infrastructure is really powerful. And one other thing is we have AppOptics. Now, AppOptics is it might look like the same thing on a high level if you're saying application monitoring. Where the two kind of draw their own lines is where we're talking about holistic monitoring in Server Application Monitor. AppOptics has a heavy focus on instrumenting our own custom non-proprietary applications. So let's say you've built a distributed application and you obviously need to know when it's up and available. That's the key of any monitoring application. But as they become more complex, you need to also know what are the dependencies without assigning those. So in this case, we instrument the language framework associated with that application. So in your case, your application might be built in Java. That's a pretty common language framework. So if I click on Next, you see we can do this in the Windows or Linux environment. So for this sake, I'm just going to say Windows, and I'm going to call my application Test1. Now, what you'd want to do here is, if you have a Java-developed application, being able to use our library, the SolarWinds agent library in this case, so it's called the Java agent setup, being able to authenticate a service token with your service name, which is Test1. So we need to have access to this software as a service platform. But then configuring that Java web application to actually run that agent into your application. All we're doing then is we're starting the JVM, the Java virtual machine, to load that agent. Now that sounds like a lot of information, but when we think about what this is giving us, by instrumenting the language framework, by making changes to the drivers and libraries associated with that application, when it makes a downstream HTTP web call, we'll collect that in the form of a trace. So to show you what that's going to look like, let's say we, for the sake of a discussion, we'll have a hotel, a booking site. And I've got different components of this site. I've got a booking service, an authentication service. They all do different things and they talk to different services. Being able to see a similar dependency map that we were looking at in Orion. So being able to see, I've got this booking service that makes calls to different other services. It talks to an admin panel, into an authentication service. But also when we look at this top-down view, we might have a booking service talk to a Mongo database, but at the same time, that same booking service might talk to other database instances. And those instances might have different performances. So in this case, we'll focus on the booking service because we see it in a bucket or in a critical state. So if I go to my list view, I can see all my different services that I've instrumented from their language framework. And I want to understand why are they in a critical state and really how can I fix my issue. So rather than just knowing an application is down and here are key performance indicators, I want to know, no matter how complex the application is, where are those individual web calls going to? The product takes a unique approach in the industry in the sense that it applies an element of machine learning to say, based on historical data, where is the product, what is the change in that shift delta since last week? So I'm comparing to last week and it's saying unusual activity on the host. So there's a warning there that maybe it's a host-related issue. So there's an element of infrastructure monitoring, and we'll come to that in a while. But the main thing we're noticing consistently is that it's spending most of its time making database activity to the Mongo database. Most of the time spent in the database and the activity on the application is going to the Mongo database. So if I went into a details view, I could see from the total response time of the application, the bits in blue, that's database. Or green, that's the application. So definitely the database has been a consistent trend that it takes up a certain amount of time. So how can I fix that issue with my application? How can I make the application run a bit quicker and ultimately address the Mongo database bit? So if I went into that overview and I was just to click on database, the product itself takes all those individual calls, it filters them into a bunch of different conditions, and in this case, it's looking at all of that Mongo database activity, and it's breaking it up into each individual table. So I can see just from a high level, without really understanding the application, the booking table is the most frequently called one. It also takes the most total time. So by going into the traces, keeping in mind these are just the web HTTP calls coming from the application, it's filtered already just by a natural process of elimination. Don't look at the quick queries, only look at the slow ones. It's showing me all queries from a specific application, specifically to the Mongo database, find operations against the booking table. And from this table view, I can see the slowest query is definitely this anomaly, this one to highlight here. I can drag over this heat map and actually filter down to that specific anomaly. I could also filter it down by the 95th percentile if I wanted to remove those outlying anomalies, because really it's not a fair reflection of the performance of our application. It's only ever happened once. But if I went into that traced request to see why it was so slow, this is the power of AppOptics. You know, being able to go in, say 75% of the time is spent in the database calls, of which here are your queries that are causing the issues. And if I were to go into the details view, I can see, just from instrumenting the language framework, which in this example is a Ruby on Rails application, I can see all of the external calls made through it. So think of it like the full stack view, instrumenting client-side code, being able to see what web servers are associated with the application. Is there Apache, IIS, something like that? And from a back-end, SQL, NoSQL perspective, is there a Microsoft SQL database? In my case, it's a MongoDB. But being able to know, here's the query that was executed against it, how often it was run, and how slow that was. It's not really going to give me the insight into how to improve my query. Certainly, SolarWinds addresses that in its ITOM perspective by introducing us to products like Database Performance Monitor, which is great for those open source databases like we're talking about, MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB. But then we also have database solutions on premise, heavily focused on proprietary databases like MS SQL Server, Amazon, Sybase, those kind of examples. So that, when we look at all of our solutions, whether it be getting a high-level view of all the applications and how they're running and how they tie into one another, or if you have a custom distributed application that maybe you just want to get code profiling information as to what is going on in Java and where am I losing time, that is where AppOptics addresses it. And since our 2020.2, the latest release of the Orion platform, if I were to go into a host, and let's say I go to any specific host in this case, we always had, well, since the last updates, we've had this API poller, and it allows us to get a request or post requests against any specific HTTPS endpoint. But now, because the focus we're getting from our users is that what is the point of buying SolarWinds products if they're not intertwined? So as a result, if in our API poller management, we have the ability to assign templated API pollers. So let's say if I'm using Atlassian or it could be AppOptics, I just type in the product name, then they'll already have an API poller for AppOptics. So if I want to get that good data I'm looking at in AppOptics and I want to consolidate that in the Orion platform, I can just choose an API poller that was already created for this purpose. I can click Next, choose the authorization method, and let the data come in. As long as I have an API key from my AppOptics account for authorization, we're good to go. So AppOptics really is focused on those DevOps. You could argue the people who are working in fixing the product or identifying the unusual performance in their applications, whereas Server Application Monitor from a much higher level allows us to get deep dive analysis into maybe our systems, our Windows, Linux systems, as well as all of the applications that you can definitely get health performance metrics from your containers. And from, let's say from SQL Server perspective, which databases are running fine and, are they not? But if you need to go deeper dive into it and you need to know, where those individual activities are coming from, AppOptics addresses that. And then if you want to look at, okay, I know it's a query level issue, do you have a way of fixing that? Then we have solutions that also address these needs as well. If it's specifically around my MongoDB database, I can just scroll through my database that I'm currently monitoring. I have a MongoDB instance here, so I can just apply it and just look at the health performance metrics of that. If I want to see what queries are run against that specific instance, I can always go into my profiler and just from my top queries by total time, in my case, I don't have any queries for that specific instance, but it's powerful to be able to go in, see which query was causing that issue, and actually get that deep dive analysis into how can I fix that problem, similar to what we did with AppOptics and Server Application Monitor on an application perspective. So from that point, if you want to do infrastructure monitoring, both products will work. If you need if you need a software as a service solution to see, are my Windows and Linux servers running smoothly, we can use AppOptics. We can run an agent into the environment and pull back those metrics like CPU utilization, memory usage, disk swaps, that kind of stuff, by running those manual agent MSI, in the case of Windows, in that environment. And we can use that host to plug into over 100 integrations. So things like your web servers, your databases, and pull back key performance indicators from that. So if you need let's say, a software service, a cloud-hosted solution that will pull back data from my, different applications I'm running, even as a DevOps engineer, then AppOptics can work fine. But if you're looking for remotely discovering hundreds of systems and applications that reside on those systems, then Server Application Monitor works perfect. But it's not really a competition as to which product is the better choice. Since we integrate, we provide the API poller and those templates, you can pull that same AppOptics data in and consolidate and just expand on these powerful maps that really show us things like your database cluster and seeing how everything ties into one another and what's the overall performance on that.
The kind of key word there is integration, right? And not giving away any secrets here, but maybe there's some more integration coming. But that's I can't tell you anything right now.
I'm looking forward to it.
And it may not be too far away either. So anybody on the call, keep your ears open for some more integration news coming out.
That's really terrific. Thank you, Nigel. As you can see, the tools are incredibly powerful, and at the same time, it can get a little bit complex, but then again, our environments are complex too. And so that's really what the teams are here to help you with. From Loop1 to SolarWinds is understanding how best to monitor your environment, leveraging DPA, leveraging DPM, leveraging AppOptics, leveraging SAM, leveraging Virtualization Manager. And as John was mentioning with regard to integration, integrating all of those tools and integrating it beyond just the tool-to-tool data correlation, but also back into incident management through service management and the visualizations for all of the different stakeholders. So just really fantastic there, Nigel. It's a lot of information to consume in a pretty short period of time, but I think it really demonstrates the power of the Orion suite as well as the AppOptics capabilities and into DPA and DPM as well. So terrific. Well done. So John, if somebody wants to try these tools, what can they do to try these tools if they haven't used them before?
Well, we've got trials for everything, right? So you can certainly create a little POC, as we call it. So the majority of our products are 30-day trials. You also get DPA is a 14-day trial. And the SaaS products you can also run trials on as well. An easy way to do it is to call you and your team, right? And you guys can set up little POCs for your customers and, maybe do it with some of their own data, capture some data over a number of weeks and then provide reports back using the customer's data themselves, which is much more valuable from that regard. And yep. I love your maturity model. I think it's perfect for the ITOM industry and the ITOM marketplace. And customers, need to understand where they are on that maturity line and how they can progress from one level to the next. And, your services can help do that, 100%.
Appreciate that, John. And so, if you're interested in trying any of these tools, you can certainly do that on your own directly with SolarWinds. But if you'd like some additional assistance with a proof of concept and you want to do some more advanced integrations through that proof of concept, Loop1 is here to help you with that as well. And of course, one of the other benefits to running a proof of concept with tools like these is it also simplifies how you might understand the licensing level that you need, because when you do tools like SAM in a demo, you'll find that it's an unlimited version of the demo that allows you to cover a wide array of the type of monitoring that you would want to do and help to identify what your actual licensing needs would be through the use of the product itself, as opposed to having to sort of guess at it. So we're really coming up on the end of the hour here. We did have one question come in with regard to the creation of the Active Directory map that was shown, Nigel.
Absolutely.
The question was whether or not that is now something that's created through AD Insight, or is there an agent required to create that map?
No, so you're absolutely right. So from the AD Insight template is how we will pull back the data, but the maps are very much defaulted view. So once those template views, it'll fill in the data into those and do all the relevant, topology mapping. You can, of course, elaborate on that and build out your own views and expand on it. But certainly if we're making reference to, the map that was on the Active Directory overview map, that is very much the defaulted view. All we're worried about is polling that data remotely, WMI protocol, pull it back, all via the App Insight template, and it should look the same as what it did in my view.
Terrific. Thanks, Nigel. So we are at the top of the hour. We really appreciate. Thanks, Robert, for the question. Great to have you here. And for the rest of you, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to work with you either through Loop1 or SolarWinds. And thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to working with all of you as we go forward. Thank you again to John, to Nigel, and of course to the ever elegant Helen Owens for hosting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. And if you could complete the feedback when you leave the webinar as well, that would be great.
I thought it was great, Helen. There you go.
Good job.
See you soon. We'll do it again.
Thanks
okay.
all.
Bye.
Bye.